It's 1992. The 8-bit era has all but drawn to a close, but it's left in its wake a revitalized video game industry filled with the unlimited potential of richer graphics, deeper storytelling, and innovative gameplay. Join us as we count down the top 40 best-selling games of 1992, including some titles that left a lasting mark on gaming history. Number 40, Krusty's Funhouse. Our first entry in 1992 plays kinda like a reverse Lemmings, where instead of trying to save cute little creatures by guiding them to safety, you're actively attempting to lead them to their gruesome demise. Players manipulate the environment using movable objects like blocks, pipe fragments, vacuum tubes, and propelling devices to create paths for the rats that Krusty is trying to eliminate from his theme park. In a rare move for the early 90s, an era known mostly for first and third-party exclusives, Krusty's Funhouse was released on every major platform simultaneously, even PC. Number 39, Rash II. Like 1991's Road Rash II combines racing with vehicular combat with the goal of finishing in the top 3 at any cost. Developed in under a year, the game nevertheless beat its predecessor in sales, introducing a few new features and graphics that felt a bit smoother and less grainy. The Road Rash series would continue with 5 more sequels and even inspired a successful Kickstarter campaign in 2013 that resulted in the spiritual successor Road Redemption. Number 38, Darkwing Duck. Based on the popular Disney TV series of the same name, Darkwing Duck serves as one of the many examples of Capcom's high-quality Disney tie-ins and has been praised for its stunning graphics for the NES, animation, and family friendliness. In the game, Darkwing can use his cape as a shield against projectiles, which is a pretty novel mechanic, and you can also grab onto hooks or ledges for alternative navigation, adding depth to platforming challenges. In 2018, the developers of Sonic Mania pitched a DuckTales Remastered style sequel to Capcom, and they even created a prototype, but Capcom ultimately declined. Number 37, Dragon Ball Z Super Saiya Legend. Super Saiya Legend was the 7th Dragon Ball game to be released in Japan. Not one of these games ever released in North America, unless you count Dragon Power, but we don't talk about that one. Featuring a unique card-based battle system, Super Saiya Legend follows the events from the Dragon Ball Z manga and TV series relatively faithfully, all the way up until the climactic battle against Frieza. Fans of the series found lots to love, especially in being able to explore alternate storylines with unique events and dialogue if they managed to keep characters alive that should have died according to canon, like being able to have Yamcha with you on planet Namek. Number 36, Super Soccer. Most people probably don't realize how important a role soccer games have played in video game history. There have been over 1,200 games released in this genre. You heard that right, 1,200. But one of the first and one of the most influential to come to the Super Nintendo was Super Soccer. The use of Mode 7 for a faux 3D field view was a key selling point, showcasing the SNES's capabilities and making the game visually impressive for 1992. Called Super Formation Soccer in Japan, the game received 4 sequels in that country, all on the Super Nintendo, while the West moved on to the newly launched FIFA franchise. Number 35, Super Batter Up. A lot of baseball games released in 1992, each with its own unique hook. Games like Roger Clemens, Nolan Ryan, and Cal Ripken didn't have much to offer beyond a celebrity endorsement. Others, like Sports Talk Baseball, featured live commentary. But it was Super Batter Up that came out on top of the pile in sales numbers. Unlike many other games at the time, Super Batter Up had an official license with the MLB Players Association, granting it the ability to use real-life player names. Add to this some especially solid controls and unique touches like a popularity meter that makes the crowd go wild over certain players, and it's no wonder gamers in '92 chose Super Batter Up. Number 34, F1 ROC. F1 ROC, or Race of Champions, is a racing sim that emphasizes strategic elements like car customization, financial management, and damage repair, offering a more realistic racing experience. Critics appreciated the extensive car customization in career mode, offering long-term replayability, and as one of only a few games with official Formula 1 licensing, the game was well received by racing enthusiasts for its realism. However, F1 ROC failed to achieve the same level of mainstream popularity as a certain other game that released in the same year. Number 33, Super Adventure Island. Super Adventure Island follows Master Higgins as he embarks on a quest to save his girlfriend Tina, who's been turned into a stone statue by the evil sorcerer Darkcloak. A unique feature of the game is the hunger mechanic, with a bar that depletes unless you keep eating fruit, making this arguably an early entry in the survival genre. Despite the prehistoric aesthetic, Super Adventure Island was about as 90s as they come, with music that could have come from a Marky Mark album, and even a skateboard mode. Number 32, Streets of Rage 2. Don't let the 32 in the corner fool you, because Streets of Rage 2 was a massive hit that even surpassed the first entry in the series in sales. Be sure to check out 1991 for more on that game. But since Streets of Rage 2 only released in late December, most of its sales would occur next year. The sequel introduced 2 new playable characters, an in-depth special attack system, improved graphics, and a duel mode where 2 players can fight it out against each other. The second entry solidified the Streets of Rage series' spot in popular culture, spawning 3 6-part comics and a novella in 1993. A movie is even in development as of 2025, with the creator of John Wick writing and producing. Number 31, Super Star Wars. Super Star Wars follows the story of the original 1977 Star Wars film, with players controlling Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Chewbacca. Featuring run-and-gun mechanics and even some lightsaber melee action later in the game, Super Star Wars was a fun side-scrolling adventure. But what most fans remember above all else are the groundbreaking vehicle-based levels, where you take control of a land speeder or even fly an X-Wing into the trench of the Death Star. This would continue to be the most faithful recreation of that epic climax of the film until the following year, when Star Wars Rebel Assault would blow everyone away with its unparalleled graphics on the PC. Number 30, Out of This World. A physicist accidentally transports himself to another dimension during an experiment, facing dangerous creatures and hostile natives. No, I'm not talking about Half-Life, this is 1992's Out of This World. The game is known for its cinematic presentation, using rotoscoping and vector graphics for lifelike animations, building on earlier attempts like Prince of Persia. Out of This World received near universal praise from critics for both the PC and Super Nintendo versions. The game would release on the Genesis as well the following year. Number 29, Batman Returns. With 9 distinct games coming out across various PC platforms, the Genesis, Super Nintendo, Master System, NES, and SaGa CD, it seems everyone wanted a piece of the video game pie for the popular movie tie-in. But in 1992, it was the Genesis version of Batman Returns that reigned supreme. In this 2D platforming game with action and beat-em-up elements, players control Batman across many diverse levels using gadgets like batarangs, super batarangs, smoke bombs, and a harpoon gun. The dark graphics match the dark tone of the movie. While the Batman branding guaranteed a certain level of commercial success, the Genesis game hasn't been viewed favorably compared to the Super Nintendo and SaGa CD versions that had come out the following year. Number 28, Quackshot, starring Donald Duck. Disney's duck characters were popular in the early 90s to a fascinatingly high degree. Though Donald Duck was originally created back in 1934, a lot of credit for the expanded duck universe of Disney goes to Carl Banks, who created Scrooge McDuck and other famous duck characters in Disney Comics in the early 1940s. The surge in the 90s is likely due to the success of DuckTales, which was based on Banks' work, combined with nostalgia among older Disney fans and a resurgence of the overall Disney brand at the time. Anyway, Quackshot is a platformer where you play as Donald on a quest to find a lost treasure. Puzzle solving using the plunger gun keeps things interesting, but many critics found that platforming elements were too easy. The game's art was done by Takashi Yuda, the famous SaGa artist that created Knuckles the Echidna 1 year later. Number 27, King's Quest VI. King's Quest VI, Air Today, Gone Tomorrow, get it? Is Sierra's 1992 entry in its long-standing classic King's Quest adventure game series. Known for series like Gabriel Knight, Leisure Suit Larry, and rather bizarrely as the original publisher of Half-Life in 1998, Sierra really came onto the scene with the success of King's Quest. The 6th entry is beloved for the quality of its puzzles, solid story, and enormous replay value. The CD-ROM version, released the following year, featured a revised soundtrack including the famous ballad Girl in the Tower. A CD with Girl in the Tower was sent by Sierra to radio stations, and the game came bundled with a pamphlet urging players to call their local stations and demand they play the song. So many people called in that radio stations started threatening Sierra with lawsuits, leading to co-founder Ken Williams stating that it was the radio stations who were the criminals for not playing the song. We at Early Epoch are inclined to agree. Girl in the Tower is an absolute banger, and if you haven't heard it, you have our permission to pause the video and give it a listen right now. Number 26, Contra 3: The Alien Wars. Primarily a side-scrolling run-and-gun, Contra 3 innovates by including stages with an overhead perspective, utilizing the Mode 7 functionality of its new 16-bit platform. Reviews were overwhelmingly positive, not only when the game released, but even years later, with Electronic Gaming Monthly in 1997 putting the game in its top 10 best console games of all time. Nobuya Nakazato, directing his first of many Contra games, felt that the earlier entries had overly realistic action, so for Contra 3 he aimed to incorporate more over-the-top elements. While worried this shift might not sit well with longtime fans, he thought it would make the game more engaging. An example is the inclusion of a sequence where the player clings to soaring missiles, which push the Super NES's sprite limits. The devs came up with a clever workaround by using background tiles to create the helicopter and missiles, with an effect that looks pretty good. Number 25, SimCity. Dropping out of the top 10 from last year, but still selling decently well in '92, SimCity proved such a massive success for Maxis that it spawned an entire spin-off business outside the realm of gaming. That's right, the game was considered so groundbreaking that companies like Chevron and Markle Foundation were banging on Will Wright's door demanding a serious business sim for their very real businesses. In Chevron's case, this resulted in Sim Refinery, a learning tool for new management staff that allowed users to manage a virtual refinery, balancing inputs like crude oil and outputs like gasoline while dealing with variables such as market prices and operational challenges. Decades later in 2020, a retired Chevron engineer rediscovered a floppy disk with Sim Refinery on it, which was then copied to the Internet Archive where you can still find it today. As for Maxis Business Simulations, it was eventually spun off from Maxis and continued to operate as Thinking Tools Inc. before eventually shuttering in 1998. Number 24, Golden Axe 2. In this sequel, the 3 playable characters from the first Golden Axe return to fight a new clan of evil warriors. This beat-em-up released to fairly mixed reviews due to being too close to the original and was also overshadowed by the much more popular Streets of Rage 2. Still, Golden Axe 2 did well enough to spawn a third game in 1993. Unfortunately, this one didn't fare any better, with Electronic Gaming Monthly commenting, "SaGa of Japan is not going to release this title here in the States, and for good reason. The graphics are by far some of the most plain looking on the Mega Drive." Savage. But nostalgia can be a powerful force in the gaming industry, so in 2008, SaGa gave it another go with Golden Axe Beast Rider, which also bombed. After the first entry, this series is pretty much cursed. Ah well, at least we know SaGa won't try again anytime soon. Oh. Number 23, Desert Strike: Return to the Gulf. Desert Strike was a weirdly timed game. The game came out on the Genesis in March 1992, exactly 1 year after the conclusion of Operation Desert Storm, the US-led offensive against Iraq. A little bit insensitive to release a video game about such a recent conflict? Probably, but if we're being honest, of all the questionably ethical moves Electronic Arts has made over the years, this one probably isn't all that bad. Either way, Desert Strike was a huge success for EA. In fact, at the time, it was their highest selling game ever. It was also praised by critics for both the sophistication of its gameplay and the impressive graphics. Desert Strike came out for the SNES later the same year, and over the next 5 years, EA released 4 sequels, selling a combined total of almost 3 million copies. Number 22, John Madden Football 93. Another EA game that released for both major 16-bit consoles, Madden 93 followed up on the successful 1992 entry in the series with yet another well-received game. In fact, retrospectives point to Madden 93 as the one that set the bar for all the games to follow. There were a few innovations this year, including a coin toss mechanic, headbutting, one-handed catches, and taunting, but despite these relatively minor changes, the game was still criticized by some for being too similar to its predecessor. This criticism would of course become a mainstay of the series, no less predictable than the presence of the famous coach himself. Number 21, The Addams Family. Jump into the shoes of Addams Family patriarch Gomez on a mission to rescue the other members of your family from the clutches of Abigail Craven. The game is based on the last 20 minutes only of the popular tie-in movie that came out a month prior. The Addams Family is a fairly standard side-scrolling platformer with some puzzle-solving elements. The Super Nintendo version was received better than the version for the NES, which was really starting to show its age at this point in terms of gameplay, music, and graphics limitations. Even though the game was derivative and a little uninspired, it sold well enough to earn a spot just outside of the top 20, due largely to the marketing strategy of releasing just after the movie, proving that sometimes timing matters just as much as quality. Number 20, Romancing Saga. Romancing Saga is the third entry in the Final Fantasy Legends series. I bet some of you didn't see that coming. Why the name change? Well, the simple answer is there wasn't one. Final Fantasy Legend was always called SaGa in Japan, and since this was the first game in the series that didn't release in North America, it retains only the SaGa name. Romancing SaGa focuses on 8 unique characters, each with their own personal quests and each driven by their own individual motivations. This was a real creative story idea in an era more than a quarter century before Octopath Traveler. The first SaGa game to come out on a home console, Romancing SaGa was such a success in Japan that it resulted in 12 further SaGa games, including 2 direct sequels for the Super Nintendo in '93 and '95. And the series is still going strong to this day, with SaGa Emerald Beyond coming out in 2024, though the future's in some doubt due to this latest entry facing poor reception and low sales. Number 19, Super Mario Land. Mario's first appearance on the Game Boy, Super Mario Land, which released way back in 1989, was still pulling big numbers in '92. Now, although this was Mario's first ever appearance on the Game Boy, did you know it wasn't his first time on a handheld? Far from it. He had appeared on many handhelds throughout the 80s. Nintendo's famous Game & Watch machines frequently featured Mario. He appeared in Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., Donkey Kong 2, Mario's Cement Factory, Mario's Bombs Away, Mario Bros, somewhat disappointingly about Mario and Luigi working in a bottling plant, and Super Mario Bros. In 1986, which was a surprisingly sophisticated platformer. Now, this might be a controversial take, but not everyone at early Epoch considers Game & Watch to be real handheld consoles. For these heathens, Super Mario Land holds a place of even greater historical importance. Number 18, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Turtles in Time. Ninja Turtles games in the early 90s start to get a bit confusing to keep straight. Turtles in Time was officially called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4 in North America because it was the 4th Ninja Turtles game to come out for a Nintendo console. But it was called Teenage Mutant Hero Turtles 4 in Europe, since Europeans figured ninjas were too violent. But since the 3rd Ninja Turtles never released in Europe, the number didn't make sense. In Japan, the game didn't have a number at all, and on the Sega Genesis, Konami released a whole different game called the Hyperstone Heist later in the same year. Still following me? While both games maintain a nostalgic place in their fans' hearts, some consider Hyperstone Heist to be a slightly inferior copycat of its SNES rival. Not exactly a fair statement considering both are actually based on the same arcade game. One thing's for sure though, Turtles in Time performed better commercially and proved a hit for Konami and Nintendo. Number 17, Super Mario Bros. We're now into year 7 of Super Mario Bros. Place in the top 40. It was at this point that the Titan finally started to fall, given the bundling of the brand new NES Challenge set switching instead to Mario Bros. 3, a truly historic run for the Italian plumbers. What makes this feat even more impressive is the fact that such an amazing game fit onto a tiny 40 kilobyte cartridge. For context, this image of Mario is exactly 40 kilobytes. The developers had to get pretty creative to fit such a smooth and visually appealing game into such a small package. One trick they used was reusing sprites. For example, the bushes and clouds were actually recolored versions of the same shape. This saved considerable space. Super Mario Bros. Ends its run in the top 40, having sold nearly 40 million copies total, earning a place as one of the best-selling video games of all time, but even more importantly, playing a critical role in reviving the gaming industry for generations to come. Number 16, Mario Paint. Bundled with its very own Super NES mouse, Mario Paint captured the imaginations of millions of gamers when it stormed onto the scene in 1992. The game features several game modes. There's Gnat Attack, where you swat 100 insects across 3 levels, ending with a boss fight against King Watinga. The Coloring Book, which is exactly what it sounds like. Animation Land lets you create looping animations with up to 9 frames each. The Stamp Maker lets you design and edit custom stamps. The Drawing Board is a surprisingly robust graphics editor. And last but probably most fondly remembered by fans is the Music Composer. The millions of copies sold over its lifetime only tell half the story because the ingenious bundling with the mouse peripheral meant a boost in sales for future games that used it, of which there are surprisingly many. Over 75 games were compatible with the Super NES mouse, confirming it as far from a mere gimmick like some assumed at the time. Number 15, Kirby's Dream Land. The first ever appearance of Kirby was in '92's Kirby's Dream Land, a huge hit for Nintendo that would become one of the best-selling Game Boy games of all time. The game was also a big win for HAL Laboratory, though it was far from their first game like some people seem to think. HAL's roots go all the way back to the mid-'80s with important titles like Golf and Balloon Fight. Kirby was an incredibly creative platformer with famous abilities like inhaling enemies and flying through the air as you fight your way to confront the evil King Dedede. And beyond being a great game in its own right, the protagonist it spawned became a household name that has starred in an astounding 40+ games as of 2025, not even including other appearances such as in the Smash Bros. Series. Number 14. Final Fantasy V. In an era where the elemental crystal's power fades, threatening global catastrophe, 4 destined heroes, Bartz, Lena, Galoof, and Ferris, rise as warriors of the light. Marked by sacred shards, they traverse fractured worlds to defeat the Dark Lord X-Death and seal the void, securing the fate of existence. This was the epic tale told in the 5th entry of the Final Fantasy series. Beyond the solid storyline, the game also innovated gameplay-wise, especially with its significantly expanded job system that had over 20 jobs to choose from. Despite only releasing in Japan, this game was so successful it was followed up in 1994 by an animated sequel. Final Fantasy Legend of the Crystals takes place 200 years after Final Fantasy V, and this early attempt of translating the Final Fantasy universe into film has proven polarizing, with some fans hating it and others appreciating it for what it is. Number 13. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Rising a few positions from 18th in 1991, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past cemented its place in video game history in '92 as it reached a level of critical acclaim and commercial success to ensure it would be remembered as one of the greatest video games of all time. And it has been. A lesser-known sequel was broadcast on Satellaview in 1997, in Japan only, called Ancient Stone Tablets. And in case that sentence didn't make sense to you, Satellaview was an add-on to the SNES in Japan that let you stream games via satellite. Despite its impressive technical capabilities and moderate niche appeal, the add-on was unfortunately considered a commercial failure by Nintendo. One of its interesting features though was called SoundLink. SoundLink enabled live CD quality sound to be broadcast into your game, allowing for things like live voice acting for cutscenes. There were a few drawbacks, most notably the audio broadcasts were on a schedule, so you had to make sure to keep pace with the intended progression of the game. But can you imagine what it must have been like to experience professional voice acting of your favorite Zelda characters in a Super Nintendo game? Luckily, for those outside Japan, a proper sequel, A Link Between Worlds, would come out in 2013 for the 3DS. Number 12. Lemmings. Spoiler alert, get ready to see Lemmings on a lot of these lists going forward because this game was a surprise smash hit across an astounding 27 different platforms. Lemmings had come out on the Amiga, DOS PCs, Mac, and the SNES in 1991. 92 saw the addition of many more, including Genesis, Master System, NES, and even the Game Gear. And the Game Gear version of the game looked surprisingly passable considering how uncommon games like this were for handheld consoles at the time. It really showcases just how advanced the Game Gear was compared to other handhelds. But where Lemmings really shone was on the PC, where it even received some expansion packs such as Oh No, More Lemmings in 1991 and Christmas Lemmings, which released between 91 and 94. Number 11. Super Mario Land 2. Coming in just outside the top 10 and releasing at the tail end of the year is the not-so-long-awaited sequel to 1989's Super Mario Land. The sequel is a pretty significant departure from its predecessor, akin to the difference between Super Mario Bros. And Super Mario Bros. 3 on the NES. Actually, Super Mario Land 2 bears a lot of similarities to Super Mario Bros. 3, right down to the overworld map. Another big new feature is the ability to save your game, the first ever Mario game on a handheld to have this. A little Easter egg can be found by sitting on the game over screen for exactly 2 minutes and 30 seconds. The game will play Tataka's song, a special melody created by Kazumi Tataka and hidden in nearly every game he's composed the music for. Given that 1992 marks the very beginning of Tataka's career, the song had only been heard 3 times prior to this, including 2 other Game Boy games as well as Mario Paint. Super Mario Land was well received and has gone down as one of the best and highest selling Game Boy games of all time. This is it, folks. We've reached the top 10 best-selling games of the year. Will the mascot favorites dominate, or is there room at the top for a classic third-party contender? We'll find out in a moment, but first some honorable mentions. Wolfenstein 3D. When you think of a modern first-person shooter, pretty much any modern first-person shooter, you can feel confident that its roots lie with Wolfenstein 3D. Of all the games that released in 1992, you'd be hard-pressed to find one that's been more influential than id Software's masterpiece about an Allied spy conducting missions against evil Nazi foes. The game was so promising that when id Software approached big-time publisher Sierra Entertainment prior to release, Sierra offered to buy them out for $2.5 million. Other investment companies also started reaching out with various deals to purchase the studio or to take it public. All of these deals eventually fell through, and id Software continued building a strong reputation within a niche corner of the gaming world, selling their games via mail order, if you can believe it. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. There's a Thai restaurant that I like to go to sometimes, and the spiciest option on the menu is what I eventually found out was called Foreigner Spicy by staff, in contrast to the Thai Spicy that was available by special order if they trusted you were able to stomach it. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest is the Foreigner Spicy of the JRPG genre. A Final Fantasy spin-off title specifically designed to appeal to Western gamers, differing mainly with the inclusion of some action-adventure elements. The game was actually fairly well received in America, eventually selling 400,000 copies there over its lifetime. In fact, it did so well it was even re-released in Japan as the somewhat hilariously titled Final Fantasy USA. Unfortunately, because the sales were split across multiple years, the game never did well enough to crack the top 40 in any single year. Dune II. Dune II is a real-time strategy game based on Frank Herbert's sci-fi novel series. The game was considered a commercial success with 250,000 lifetime sales since PC games were still having a lot of trouble breaking through at mainstream levels compared to consoles. But what earns it a spot as an honorable mention on this list is its place as the archetypal RTS, with all the elements that continue to be staples of the genre to this day, like base building, resource management, unit production, fog of war, and fast-paced real-time decision-making. PC RTS games were still in their infancy, with even games like 1994's Warcraft surprisingly failing to make the top 40 across every platform, but over time this classic would be recognized as the granddaddy of a huge and successful global phenomenon. And now on to the top 10. Number 10, Dragon Quest V. Dragon Quest V's unique story follows the epic tale of a hero's entire life, beginning with the formative years of his childhood and continuing with his marriage and fatherhood, eventually culminating with a climactic battle to avenge his father and save the world. The story highlights family, love, and destiny across generations. The first in the series to release on a 16-bit console, Dragon Quest V introduced many innovative concepts, perhaps most notably the monster recruitment mechanic. This system allows certain monsters, after you defeat them in random encounters, to offer to join your team. It added significant depth to gameplay, as monsters could be equipped with armor and weapons, gain levels with species-specific caps, and participate in battles alongside human characters. It was a hugely creative concept at the time. Remember, this game came out a full 4 years before Pokemon, and while Game Freak never specifically mentioned Dragon Quest V as a direct inspiration, at least officially, one has to imagine, given how ubiquitous it was in Japan, that it played a big role in creator Satoshi Tajiri's creative process, even if on a subconscious level. Number 9, Super Mario Bros. 3. Falling a few positions from 1990 and 91, Super Mario Bros. 3 nevertheless maintains its spot in the top 10 this many years after launch. Very impressive. One of the game's most captivating elements is its stage play-inspired design. The game's levels feature platforms that appear bolted onto the background, suspended by ropes and casting drop shadows, creating the illusion of a theatrical performance. This led fans to speculate for years that the game was a stage play acted out by the Mario cast. The theory was confirmed by creator Shigeru Miyamoto over 25 years later when he was finally asked in an interview, "Was Super Mario Bros. 3 all just a performance?" to which he nodded his head in the affirmative. The game's title screen sets the tone, featuring a stage curtain being drawn open to reveal the game world, immediately suggesting a theatrical beginning. This isn't merely a visual flourish, as it turns out, it frames the player's experience as entering a performance space. And when Mario completes a level, he walks off screen as if exiting stage right, further reinforcing the idea. Bravo, Mario, bravo. Number 8, Yoshi. Number 8 with a bullet, shooting way up the list from number 32 in 1991 is the puzzle game Yoshi following its global release. Interestingly, a leak at developer Game Freak in 2024 revealed an unreleased Nintendo DS remake of Yoshi hidden in the source code of Pokemon Black and White. Believed to have been developed in 2007 and based on a cancelled 1995 version for the SNES, the leaked prototype provides a rare glimpse into what could have been, potentially offering a modernized experience with touchscreen controls and the dual-screen functionality of the DS, an exciting refresh for what was an extremely popular early 90s title. As for the leak's broader implications, it really underscored the vulnerability of game development data in what's still a fairly immature industry in a lot of ways. But on the other hand, leaks like this bring a certain hope among some fans about the potential for lost media to resurface, like an unreleased Super Nintendo remake of Game Freak's first ever game Quinty, another fascinating discovery confirmed in the 2024 event. Number 7. Dr. Mario. Nintendo's other first-party published puzzle game continues its presence at the top of the 1992 list as well. Produced by Yokoi Gunpei, the legendary creator of the Game & Watch, Game Boy, the Metroid series, and many other huge Nintendo properties, Dr. Mario has had a fairly significant cultural impact considering its fairly basic premise. The game has received quite a few sequels and spin-offs, including Dr. Mario 64, Express, Miracle Cure, Online RX, and even Dr. Mario World, a short-lived mobile game with a similar monetization scheme to Candy Crush. As for the good doctor himself, he's appeared in a lot of other games too, like various Super Smash Bros. Titles, WarioWare Inc., Yoshi's Woolly World, and Minecraft. Number 6. Super Mario Kart. Super Mario Kart is an iconic kart racing game featuring Mario characters racing on themed tracks. Players use power-ups and drifting to gain an advantage and win the race. Releasing midway through 1992, it set the standard for the genre and introduced addictive multiplayer racing, becoming a beloved classic. The game was so well loved that it kicked off an entire franchise, evolving with each release. Mario Kart 64 brought 3D racing, Double Dash added co-op play. For many, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe perfected the formula, becoming a Nintendo Switch bestseller with refined mechanics and stunning tracks. But a full third of a century after the original, in 2025, Mario Kart World arrived on the Nintendo Switch 2, marking the pinnacle of its legacy so far. This groundbreaking title introduced an open-world landscape, blending classic racing with exploration. But it all began way back in 1992 on the Super Nintendo. Number 5. Super Mario World. Clinching a top 5 finish after dropping just a few spots from 1991, Super Mario World was actually called Super Mario Bros. 4 in Japan, a callback to its place among what had already become an unprecedentedly successful franchise. And speaking of Japan, you may or may not be surprised to learn just how influential Japanese culture was on the creation of Super Mario World. The game's design and characters incorporate elements of Shinto animism, yokai folklore, and Japanese aesthetics, sneakily educating players worldwide about Japanese culture. One example is the way things like clouds, hills, and flowers in the game have eyes, harkening back to animist beliefs about the way nature is alive with spirits. Another example is the design of enemies like Boo, which is based on the Obaki, a shy and mysterious spirit in Japanese folklore. Fans in the West might not have totally got the references, but they nevertheless loved the aesthetic, and this combined with terrific gameplay and level design made Super Mario World a huge win for Nintendo and for Japan. Number 4. Sonic the Hedgehog. Climbing one position from last year, Sonic the Hedgehog officially beats Super Mario for the first time in 1992. Benefiting from bundling with the Genesis console, Sonic the Hedgehog gave SaGa the mascot they'd been searching for to score this early victory in the console war. One of the iconic innovations of the first game was the fan-favorite water levels. Unlike Super Mario, Sonic couldn't swim, so he would run along the bottom of the water searching for air bubbles to keep him from drowning. Makes sense, figured creator Yuji Naka, given that hedgehogs can't swim, right? Wrong. As he discovered during a visit to a hedgehog shelter in Germany in 2005, hedgehogs actually can swim, though they do sometimes struggle to climb out of the water. But the idea that Sonic can't swim has become so influential to the gameplay of the series, and to the nostalgic memories of gamers everywhere, that we can't help but feel lucky for the misunderstanding. Just like in the case of the fatalistic Lemmings, sometimes a whimsical misunderstanding of nature can ignite imaginations in really interesting ways. Number 3. Sonic the Hedgehog 2. SaGa acted fast in following up on the success of Sonic the Hedgehog with a sequel just 1 year later, introducing the lovable sidekick Tails along with multiplayer gameplay, more zones, unique themes, 3D special stages, and of course the famous supersonic transformation. There was plenty here to differentiate it from the original, but the core gameplay of moving fast through unique platforming challenges remained. Initially pitched by SaGa Technical Institute's Mark Cerny in September 1991, SaGa of America still wasn't sure enough about the success of Sonic to greenlight development. A few months later, SaGa reversed course and ordered the game created on time for the following Christmas shopping season, giving Cerny only around 9 months to make the whole game. The game's initial design was hugely ambitious, and the plan was to have about a dozen of the Japanese developers from the first Sonic join STI in America to work on it together. Unfortunately, because of tight timelines, initial problems with immigration for the Japanese contingent, differences in culture and language between the two teams, and even the eventual departure of Cerny himself, a ton had to be cut from the game. In fact, SaGa marketing director Al Nilsson estimated that the game started out an astonishing 3 times the size. Number 2. Street Fighter II. Street Fighter II was the follow-up to a very successful arcade game from 1987, the second real attempt to bring the series to a mainstream console audience. The first attempt was actually with Capcom's hit beat-em-up game from earlier on in this list, Final Fight. Originally called Street Fighter 89, just before Final Fight shipped out to arcades everywhere, Capcom received strong feedback that the game should be rebranded to avoid confusion, since the two were nothing alike. This left room for a true sequel a few years later, and thank God for that, because Street Fighter II became an enormous hit and the definitive title that launched an entire multimedia franchise. Street Fighter II quickly became Capcom's best-selling game ever and remained at that spot for the next 2 decades until 2013's Resident Evil 5. It would also go on to become the best-selling third-party Super Nintendo game in history. Number 1. Tetris. That's right, the king remains on top this year, an unstoppable force with seemingly no end in sight to its insane momentum and popularity. In our 1991 video, we discussed the cultural impact of Tetris, but its influence is perhaps best exemplified by the fact that 2 other tile-matching puzzle games joined it on the top 10 this year, a testament to the huge success of the genre it spawned. This is to say nothing of the dozens of one-off copycats that littered the gaming landscape. While the game appears simple, the skill cap is surprisingly high. Competitive Tetris has been around ever since shortly after the game's release, but it's reached ever higher peaks over the decades since, especially on the NES, where unique controller movements have been developed solely for the purpose of reaching ever higher plateaus. Every time it seems like the high score simply can't go any higher, the masters of this art form somehow manage to take it up to the next level. The history of this endeavor has been covered very well by channels such as Summoning Salt, which we highly recommend you checking out if you haven't already. But one thing's for sure, the story of Tetris is still, even after all this time, not quite done unfolding. What was your favorite game of 1992? We really want to hear, so make sure you let us know in the comments. There were definitely plenty to choose from, with so many classic games, some of which even launched series that are still going today. Up next, 1993. Get ready for a shakeup, because as the decade continues to unfold, developers are really starting to push the boundaries of what was once thought possible. You won't want to miss the inventive, beautiful, and just downright fun games to follow, so make sure you subscribe to the channel.